Hey guys, how's it going? Comparing here. So today's a pretty big day. I made a video a few days back about the big PoE patch coming up, and today is when the guys over at Grinding Gear decided to release the notes to everybody. And I've known about these notes, at least most of them, for a few days now because they were on the alpha servers and they were a little bit leaked in the process. Not by myself, of course, but someone had taken the time to copy them, so some other people have seen most of these notes as well. But I want to give you guys a quick rundown of the important stuff that I hadn't mentioned in the video a few days back, which mostly is in regard to what was unsaid in those, which is basically the balance changes and the passive changes, that kind of stuff. So, there's a lot of good stuff coming in the patch that, has to do with items, leagues, just like changes, but not ones that pertain to the character that you play very much. The ones that do matter, there are quite a number of them. So first, when it comes to the passive tree, they changed a few things. They changed the fact that a lot of the health nodes are now about 6% from about 8%. The ones that are a little higher, a little bit different, but that's roughly the case. So it's a reduction of 25%. And the energy shield nodes share the same fate, except the CI nodes, at least the last time I checked, were the same. So it seems that CI wasn't quite as affected as the HP version, which is pretty interesting. But because of the new leagues, the fact that they won't include the Onyx Amulet to prevent stuns, it does kind of bring out another weakness in those builds. So it's kind of understandable. And it's also complemented by the fact that, as I mentioned previously and a few days ago, they are going to lower the damage that monsters do, and this buffs armor because armor has a percentage reduction based on the amount that you're hit by. So if they lower the damage that all the monsters do, your armor essentially is much more effective at mitigating damage as a percentage. And because of this, it kind of changes the dynamic of having to stack a lot of HP to perhaps having a little bit less HP or a little bit less ES and stacking armor more than normal. So that's a pretty interesting point that exists now. I don't exactly know to what degree this is possible, but we'll have to see. We'll have to test it out when the patch is live, and we'll see what kind of builds we can come up with. But as far as the passives are concerned, there are some notable changes. In my opinion, the most notable ones are in regards to maximum resist. So overcapping your resists prior to this patch was really easy and really overpowered. There was Elemental Adaptation, which is a 1-point node near the Marauder tree, which gave you 5% to your max resist. But if you had Purity and you had Inner Force, you're already at 80. So it served as a 25% magic damage mitigation to your character, which is pretty insane. So what they have done is they lowered it from 5 to 2. 2% is still semi-significant. I mean, if you're in that area, I think you should get that kind of passive, but if you're not, you don't have to get it, as was the case with a few other builds. So that's nerfed. Inner Force is also nerfed. I believe the sum of Inner Force went from 30 to 18. It's a pretty sizable nerf, especially when you consider the fact that granites were also nerfed from 4,000 to 3,000. So spamming granites with armor scaling has been lowered, but honestly, that's really a result of the monsters doing less damage. So the actual difference may not be big or even be a difference at all. But what is significant from the reduction of Inner Force is that because it's only 18%, when it comes to Purity, at max level giving you 4 to maximum all resists, it cannot get rounded up back to 5 because Inner Force is not over 25%, and it always rounds down as a consequence. So if you had Purity, Inner Force, and Elemental Adaptation prior to the patch, your maximum resists are essentially from 85 down to 81, which is a pretty big deal. To compensate this, because while having a lot of resist is pretty good, they did lower damage, so it won't be that bad on that sense. But the main problem was going to be Reflect, and they did change Reflect. Reflect is now from 20% to 18, so it's a little bit more manageable, but it does hurt a little bit more on some builds that hadn't had their skills nerfed. However, before I go on to the skills that were nerfed, one skill that was pretty much brutalized as a result of these resist changes is Righteous Fire. There are very, very limited builds now that can actually maintain Righteous Fire from a pure HP base. In fact, I don't even know if it's possible anymore. I haven't done the math, I don't really care. But those that were Righteous Fire as a primary source of damage, full life, Comb's Heart, they're going to be in a world of hurt. Their builds are pretty much screwed. So that kind of sucks because that build kind of sucked anyway, and to destroy it is pretty harsh. But, I feel the overall changes are pretty good, so, kind of had to end badly for something. Moving on to the other skills that were affected. They buffed like Clarity because they didn't want mana regen to be worse with Inner Force if someone combined the two. So it's about at the same level with the old Inner Force and the old Clarity versus the new Clarity and the new Inner Force. I think the new Clarity is still a little bit higher, but it's roughly in the same ballpark. This is largely to encourage people to use mana as opposed to Blood Magic, because Blood Magic was inertly nerfed because they reduced life regen, because life regen is based on your maximum HP pool, which they've lowered. So, maybe a little bit more mana builds than Blood Magic builds out there, but honestly I kind of doubt it, because Blood Magic builds are strong because of their map flexibility, not so much that they're strong just as is. Well, in some cases that's true. In regards to the big skill changes, they nerfed Freeze Pulse. They nerfed Freeze Pulse by like 5% or something. It's practically insignificant if you ask me, largely because, well, I don't usually just use Freeze Pulse. I use Freeze Pulse with added Cold and with added Chaos many occasions. So for me it's nerfed like 2%. I don't really care. I think that's fine. Freeze Pulse did a lot of damage. It's still going to do a lot of damage. They nerfed Ethereal Knives because they buffed physical damage from the Oak Reward and from the belt. I don't know how much they nerfed Ethereal Knives by, but I don't really know if it's too justified because I felt that skill was kind of crappy. But we'll see. I can't really say exactly how much it was nerfed by, so that kind of makes all the difference here. They also nerfed Spark. Spark now has a 4% chance to crit from 6, and the forked and chained projectiles do not generate a new timer. So what that means is Spark will no longer kill stuff off screen, and Spark will crit for a lot less, which honestly is pretty gentle for how overpowered it currently is with the Righteous Fire Chevron's build scaling. So, people will still be Spark, but, it won't be. Maybe, if we're lucky, you won't require 2 of these or 3 of these guys to be in your group at all times to be a successful group, so which I think is a good thing overall. They also, what do they do here? They nerfed Arctic Armor or something, but I'm sure that's still overpowered because of the damage that the mobs are doing was tuned down. And they made a few other adjustments to like multi-strike melee splash on the positive side. But overall, what they've done is they've lowered the power of a lot of the spellcaster builds, and they've increased the power of physical, particularly melee physical builds. On the passive tree, they made almost all the nodes maybe about 50% stronger on average that were based around physical melee damage. So physical damage that was like 10 is going to be around 15 now. So it's really, really strong. Especially early game. Early game, these nodes are going to make a world of a difference. When it comes to racing, it's going to be a really big difference. When it comes to end game builds, we'll see. We'll see. They also changed a lot of the crit melee nodes, which I think is the most interesting fact. The nodes around the Marauder and Templar side of the tree, those that were, I think they were before 15, 15, and 40% chance to crit, are now 30, 30, and 80, if I'm not mistaken, and there's a few of these. So I think there's going to be some interesting, potential for there to be crit melee Marauder or Templar builds, or even some of the other classes with some, imagination involved. There's a lot of other changes involved in the patch. but I felt those were the really big ones. Overall, what we're going to see in Path of Exile is a reduction in the amount of people that play the cookie cutter builds, and an increase in people that start up with, you know, more unique builds, builds that are just like, hey, I like this melee ability and I can scale it enough to where I can be useful, which is a very good thing. I really think they took the right approach in this case to lower the strength of a lot of other skills in order to increase the balance of all the rest. Though my original impression is that still you won't see much difference in groups. You probably will see one or two melee classes just to up the damage, like in certain cases. But overall, we have to be realistic. In Path of Exile, especially if you're playing hardcore, the monsters do tremendous damage. And as a result, keeping your distance from them is often necessary. So as a result, melee will always be less useful in the overall setting in the group than like a ranged character. So them doing more damage overall, I feel, is necessary, and I'm not quite sure that this goal has been achieved. I still think the crit scaling on some spells will still be higher as a function of the group's damage than melee abilities. But we'll have to see, and see we will, because we're definitely going to mess around with a ton of new builds, and hopefully I'll be able to show you guys what we've come up with, especially when it comes to the 4-month leagues. And should be a lot of fun. Hope you guys are excited about the new patch as much as I am, and we'll look forward to it in a couple of days, see what we come up with then. And until then, I'll see you guys tomorrow.